So now with the Starfighter out of the way from the previous video, which we spaded, we can move on to this thing, the Mitsubishi F-1. This time you'll be joining me starting from stock, going all the way to spaded, and seeing how painful the process can be. However, despite collecting over 12 hours of raw footage, I only have a handful of clips that are actually worth showing. Yeah, it's gonna be a long one. Now, I do realize that this plane in particular received some changes from the April 2024 BR changes, in which the stock AIM-9Bs were replaced with AIM-9Es, but that doesn't really change the sort of games that I had. Both missiles are kinda meh at this point. You are at 10.3, and yeah, it can be rough at times. It does make things a bit more bearable and provide the option for slightly more reliable missile, but it's not by much. Anyways, let's talk more about how this jet performs, shall we? The flight characteristics should be fairly familiar, as the Mitsubishi T2 that comes before it is practically identical, save for this being more of a single-seat fighter, and it has 2 extra pylons for air-to-air missiles, which come in pretty handy. But being like the T2, it shares the peculiar handling in terms of just drifting through the air when you try to turn, and having a lack of rudder authority at high speeds. Also, the T2 is currently sitting at 9.7 while this is at 10.3, and just like the F-104J, it has no flares. Unlike the Starfighter, you can actually turn when this plane decides it's in the mood to do so, with the F-1 being a bit more lenient with the speeds it likes to turn at, optimally between 800 to 1100 kilometers per hour, as anything above 1200 it likes to lock up, and below 800 it ceaselessly drifts through the air, making getting your nose on target harder than it should be. It's alright at holding its speed, but once you start losing it, you lose it fast, especially around the time you start to drift in the air, which is not ideal. Overall, most controls still work across these speeds, with the sole exception being the rudder, which always seems to let me down when I need a quick adjustment to get target on someone. Now, it needs to be noted that at these speeds where you start drifting, your roll rate becomes a bit weird at certain angles, so you just have to account for that. Now, unlike the Starfighter, I found myself running into more radar missiles, which are especially annoying to deal with, just because you don't really have any means of fending off against them in this plane. You kind of just have to stay low to the deck and hope for the best, really. They're not too bad to deal with, you just have to keep that in mind when you're flying this jet. And with that, we can finally get into our first match. Now, if you're wondering about the footage in the background, that is just about every match that I had with the F1. And, yeah, we can just skim through these real quick. It won't take long. Yeah. A couple more, I think. And here we are. So, for this first match, we enter the battle low and from the side. The plan is simple: catch people off guard and hopefully get some quick kills in. We see this A4 right in front of us, the Israeli version, just prominent AIM-9B, lob one at him, and of course all he has to do is just roll a tiny bit and it loses track. He then gets absolutely nuked out of the air, and we quickly turn our attention to the left, as that's where all the enemies are. There's a J-32B just ahead of us, so we're going to go head on. We just barely dodge his guns, which is pretty good. You see that the Su-7 is right behind us, and not taking any chances. I see that he's slow, so I'm going to put it in the vertical, just to deny any sort of shot. J-32B finally goes down, and it seems we're pretty much in the clear. So we're going to just reset and try and help out our team wherever we can. And here we have the MiG-21. It's not really an interesting fight, but I'd like to just point out how bad tunnel vision can really get. I have a bit of a smooth brain moment, and yeah, I end up doing that. Our plane is fine. It's flying just perfectly, no damage. But I appear to have cut the F-5C's tail control. It's really stupid, and it is entirely my fault, but that leads us to our second kill. And with that mishap out of the way, all that's left is to clean up an Su-7. He puts up kind of a fight. He at least dodges my guns, but yeah. That's kill number 3, and that's the last of this match. You know the grind was pretty bad if this was all I could get out of it after, what is it at this point, 2 hours? 3 hours? Yeah, it's not looking good. Alright, so while the footage is rolling in the background, I just want to take a moment to really talk about some of the little things about the F-1. If you notice, early on I do run rocket pods with this thing. That is the only form of flares that you're really going to get. Now, of course, if you're going head-on with some missiles, you can use your AIM-9s to try and flare them away. Only works for heat-seeking missiles, of course. Radar ones are still going to clap you. But as long as you fly low to the deck, it should be fine. Now, there are certain times where you can climb into altitude and do pretty well, but that's really strictly limited to down tiers, as radar missiles still exist. In down tiers, it's rare to actually see radar missiles. Most people aren't actually going to be looking up there. Of course, you're going to be running into most likely MiG-21s up in altitude, but as long as you stay below the altitude that you get, like contrails and all that, you should be fine. No one's really looking and paying attention. Generally, you can see how the match is going. If you see multiple contrails up in altitude, it's a safer bet to just dive down and go to the deck. Most of your team will be doing that anyways, so it won't be too bad. Another thing I'd like to mention directly relates to the AIM-9Ps, and that is the fact that you can actually radar slave them. I know that this does work with, the F-1 and the T2. I don't actually know if it works on the Starfighter, which could be quite useful. If you don't know what radar slaving is, it's basically using your radar to track a target, and then your seeker head will automatically look in that direction. It just allows you to have a bit more wiggle room with your launch angles, and can at times provide a quicker lock time when it's more convenient. Now, of course, that doesn't improve the performance of them. It's a little thing that will work in some cases, but most of the time you don't need it, as getting your nose on to lock onto someone with this plane isn't that difficult. But yeah, now of course, if you do use radar slaving, that's going to give the enemy a radar warning. Now, you can do some pretty funny stuff with that, because there's certain times where you can just lock onto someone and they'll start freaking out and start using their flares. That depends if they know what they're doing or not. It can work at certain times. I've only had it happen like once though. Alright, 6 hours later, and what do I have to show for it? Well, most of the modifications are now researched and AIM-9Ps are equipped, but that's about it. The funny thing is that spading the Starfighter was actually much easier than this, in my opinion, and it generally came down to my terrible aim, which caused me to have some pretty bad games. Alright, so this is a perfect example of adapting to the situation as the match plays out. As you can see, there are some contrails starting to appear up in the clouds. We are below that altitude, so we're just going to continue watching and make a decision depending on how I feel. They are still pretty far away, which is fine, and then that F-8E pops up. I never really had any luck facing F-8Es at altitude head-on, so what we're going to do instead is just put it into a shallow dive and look for isolated targets, trying to stick with our team as much as possible. Now this F-5 is right in front of us and presents himself, and also, as you can see in the top left, we are at our rip speed, which is not ideal. Now he turns, but we're not going to follow that because we're going to bleed too much speed. Instead, I'm just going to disengage and look around for any new targets. Still debating whether or not I want to go after him, and I see that he's turning around, so I'm going to take him on that offer. He turns right in front of us, presenting his ass. I almost get hit by my friendly. And after that one encounter earlier, I know now to look around when I'm fighting someone, especially in a turn fight, so I'm just gonna wait. Pull just a bit too short, and now we just had to wait for him to do a move. He's gonna continue to turn fight, which is kind of interesting, because I feel like he would have gone away if he just stuck straight and flew away, but Now I notice that the Harrier is joining in, and we have to really deal with this as quickly as possible. As soon as we miss that pass, the Harrier is right in front of us, so we're just going to take the opportunity to lob an AIM-9P. Hopefully he's not watching. And he wasn't. But turns out he was already severely damaged. That makes sense. Mess up my shot again, so we're just going to loop back around. We see that there's not really anybody near us, which is fine, so we can continue doing this. And F5 gets taken out finally. With this, we're going to go to the next target that's alone, and it's this F8E. Again, he's not paying attention to us, so we're just going to lock him up, lob an AIM-9P, and that's going to connect. A lot of this plane is just positioning. You kind of want to keep your speed up just because, sure, you can turn, but going slow, it applies with any other jet. It can really put you in bad situations. Now, this is a bit of an awkward situation. As you can see, most of my team is to the right, just a bit further than me, while there's a lot of enemies in front. So we're going to just try and see who we can pick off. The F4J is going super slow, so I'm not really worried about him. More so worried about that Swedish plane. Don't want to follow that because I'm going to be presenting my rear end, which is not ideal. Try to get a head-on with the F5, miss that, and break off. And as I expected, the F4J crashes into the ground, which kind of sucks because I could have gotten an easy kill, but I'd rather stay alive and see what else I can do afterwards. So we're pushing away this F5, so we're going to give chase. He's not really paying attention to anything. We do have 2 AIM-9Ps still and 400 rounds left, which is plenty. But we are alone on this side of the map with 3 enemies in my vicinity. So I'm going to try and make quick work of this F5. But he pulls just a bit too much and rolls out of my guns. Now, luckily, no one followed me while I was chasing down the F5, so we're going to just dodge him for a bit while we go head on with the Jaguar. Don't manage to connect any of those shots, and I realized that it's not a good idea to be turn fighting those two, especially when the Jaguar already lost all of its energy putting it into the turn, so I'm just going to break off again and see if I can do anything. Now, we are gaining on this F5 right in front of us, so we're going to take the opportunity to slowly but surely chase after him. Once we are pretty close, we just send an AIM-9P. It does not track because of the flares, but he's going way too slow, and we shred his wing off. That is kill number 3, and we are going to return to base, just because I see that all my teammates are there, and we are running pretty low on fuel, only 3 minutes left. Now we still have one more obstacle in front of us, which is the J-35. Luckily he was going after a MiG-21, I'm pretty sure. Yes, he was going after a MiG-21 that was on the airfield, so he's going pretty damn slow. Now, I was not expecting to do much to him, so just burst, and that shot connected. Alright, so that gives us kill number 4. I'll take that. Now we do end up dogfighting the last guy, which is an F5, but aim seems to have left completely because neither me or my teammate managed to score a hit, and yeah, he crashes into the ground. Okay, let's ignore that and just move on to the next match. Alright, so this time we're on the wonderful Golan Heights, and we're going to do the same thing of climbing. Now, we do realize there's some contrails up, but it's not that bad. It's only a MiG-21. And we do have AIM-9Ps, so we can just lock onto his R-60. Alright, so after beautifully dodging his R-60, we turn our attention to another MiG-21 in the same match, the same exact match that we were just in. And we try to do something about him, but he sees us and turns into our path, and we're just not going to deal with that. He can turn a bit better than us, or at least that's what I assume, so we're going to extend for a bit and just look at what's happening down below us. Now, all the enemies are over there, which is fine. It's just going to be a bit of a problem if we start feeding that group one by one. Now, if you realize there's an F3H, so that means we are in a down tier, which is pretty damn good. So we're going to try and pick some people off. We don't really pick a good time to do so because they're flying right under me when I decide to dive, so I can't really follow any of them. Now, there's an Su-22, which is pretty damn slow. Can't pull there because we're going way too fast. There's a Hunter, which is going much slower than us, so we just launch an AIM-9P. He does not see that, and he gets taken out. It's kill number 1. Now, this MiG-21 is going vertical, which is very interesting. We just managed to clip him and set him on fire. That's kill number 2. We're going to just look around. We are going very, very slow after that maneuver. So just build up some speed and look at who we can go for. The Su-25 and Su-22 are very tempting, but I see there's a lot of teammates going after them. But the Su-25 is actually turning away from me, and he's pretty damn close. I do send an AIM-9P over, but he gets taken out beforehand. So I see that the Su-22 is going very slow again, which presents me with an easy kill. That's kill number 3. And just looking for who else is there. Once I see that like this side of the map is pretty good, I'm just going to continue pushing forward. There's an A-10, which is not ideal, and there's 2 of them. One of them is already enough, but given that I only have one AIM-9P left, I'd rather not take the chance, because they can just, yep, lob one right off. And if you notice, at this point I've taken off the rocket pods. I just find that they don't really provide me with too much help, because if I get into the situation where there's a missile coming towards me, I've most likely done something wrong, because how you play this plane is more so as a stealth fighter. You want to really avoid detection because you don't have flares to fend off against missiles. Now A-10's going very slow because it's a subsonic, and he presents himself very easily for me, so I'm just going to do little bursts and then finish him off. That marks kill number 4. We're just going to stay in the air for a bit longer just to see if there's any enemies. We're doing pretty good on ammo, running low on missiles, but that's fine. Kafir gets spotted right above us, and then he does a very interesting maneuver of just going straight and then looping downwards, which provides me with all the energy in the world to just sit on his ass. It's a very interesting maneuver, and then he decides to go vertical again. I'm just going to watch my movement, make sure I don't stall myself out. But at this point he's going way too slow to do anything, so just put nose on target. Rudder's just not really working with me there, but we at least crit him, and he's going way too slow, and he's going to put himself into a flat spin. I'm going to try and take him out, but I realize pretty late that, yeah, no, that's not happening. F-8U tries to do the same thing, but also misses. Anyways, that fear is going to go down, and he's not going to recover from that. That will mark kill number 5. Now, we decide to pop a blind hunt because there's only one target left, and turns out it's a J-35. He's pretty far out, but we are just about equal altitude. He's a bit higher, but that's not going to be that much of a problem as long as we play our cards right. Now, since we do have the F-8U, we're going to support him because fighting one-on-one with the J35 is not really the best idea. Just want to watch what he does. I'm not really putting afterburner just so that I don't waste my fuel. Now we do botch up that A9P, but we do manage to get a crit. And that does not count as severe damage apparently, and the F8U finishes him off. Alright, so this is the last match, and I'll let it play out most of the way. This is, by the time that I'm pretty much done with the F1, all I just had to do is get one more modification, and this is the match that got me it. So as time went on, I got more comfortable with climbing up to altitude and seeing what I can do from there. This match was a bit of an odd one because there was just too many MiG-21s to deal with, and people at altitude, so we just kind of dive just a tiny bit. We don't go all the way to deck, just enough to discourage them from following us. We still have some F8s that are level with us, so we're just going to stick with them for now, and then loop back around and try and get anyone who's not really paying attention. And as you can see, there's quite a few targets for us to choose from. This is kind of the problem. Don't really know where to go to, but you just had to kind of commit to someone. We kind of choose the wrong one. The Q5 was a bit tempting, but then it got put on fire. So we go for this MiG-21 instead, try and push ahead on, but they pull off. Now I don't really want to be following that, so I'm just going to see what he does. If he turns back around, I'm going to try and react, but he decides to just dive out, gain some speed, so I'm going to just let him do what he wants. I'm going to help this A10 instead, see what I can do with him. MiG-21's kind of in an awkward position, so we try, but not going to do that. Instead, we're going to be following this Harrier all the way back, seeing what we can do from there. Here it's being chased by an A5, Q5, and I believe a MiG-21. Yep. And it'll be able to last for a bit, but we'll have to see. MiG-21 sees us and turns back around to go for the head-on. I'm going to just set up a little bit and then spray. He gets absolutely disassembled. And just like that, we continue on all the way back to the base. They're going to the airfield, which means that they commit a bit too much. And the A5 sees that and pulls away. Now the A5 turned a bit too hard and is now losing a lot of speed, so we're able to just park our plane right behind him and launch an AIM-9P. He doesn't seem to be watching, and that's kill number 2. And would you look at that, there's another A5. And just like the previous one, he's not really paying attention. You just gotta take your opportunities. You can see that this thing can pull a bit, especially at this speed, but you don't want to be doing that for too long, or else you lose way too much speed. Now I'll mark kill number 3, and there's an Su-25 in front of us. Now it's a bit risky to go head on, but he's not really paying attention either way. Try to get something. Friendly F8 gets absolutely decimated by an R60, and we're going to just pull away. It's not worth trying to follow him with that turn because they're subsonic and they can turn much better than me. Fast forwarding a bit, we do try to do several passes on him, but don't really land anything. At this point he's going super slow though, and too many teammates are around. He's not really paying attention, so we are able to take him out with an AIM-9P. And that will basically be the end of the match. Teammates chase him down and they will eventually take him out, but I'm not in the plane to do so. So what can I say after spending all this time gathering all this footage for spading this vehicle? Well, it's just like any other plane, it's kind of tough to get used to in the start, but especially after playing for so long, it will become more familiar as time goes on. When it comes down to modifications, of course I recommend going for the missiles first. You can get belts as well in the meantime, and then once you have those, just focus on like flight characteristics, get better engine upgrades and do that. You can go for bombs if you want to, but I didn't really need them, and it's up to you whether or not you need the rocket pods to actually use as flares. In my opinion, they just put a bit more drag and not really that useful all in all. Thanks for sticking with me through this fairly long video, and it took a lot. And whenever the next time is, I'll catch you then.